a lot. And so I'd just like to go over the formal definition of that and kind of what we mean when we say invasive. So it's a non-native species, an organism that harms people, the environment, or the economy. And so when we say non-native, it was introduced from another location. This could be regionally or country-wise, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. And that, people think that poison ivy is invasive, I've heard, or Virginia creeper, but technically that cannot be ever invasive because it is a native species. We like to call those healthy growers, things that are a nuisance species. But when ISN talks about native species, some of the key marking factors are the fact that they're non-native, the fact that they usually have few to no natural predators. And an example of this is purple loosestrife. I don't know if you guys can see in the bottom there. The purple loosestrife that has a tried and true biocontrol. Purple loosestrife is an invasive species in Michigan and across the Midwest as well, where there is a tried and true biocontrol, the Gallericella beetle that you can see right there from Europe. That is something that they co-evolved together, and the Gallericella beetle will only feed on purple loosestrife as a biocontrol, but that doesn't exist. Otherwise, there's no control within our ecosystems. And then another key marking factor is the massive seed production typically. And an example is invasive honeysuckles. We have 6 species here with prolific seed amounts. One plant can produce thousands of seeds. And I don't know if it's being covered for anyone else. If you could take there you go. Go back, yeah. So I just wanted to point out that not all, like when we think of non-native and invasive are 2 different things, but all invasives are non-native. So for every 100 species introduced, like on average, about 10 naturalize and are able to reproduce in another region, and about 1 becomes invasive. And so there are most non-native introduced species are totally harmless, in fact, can be beneficial for not only our economy, like our agriculture and things like that. But so it's not everything that you bring over that's non-native is invasive, but all invasives are non-native by definition. Next slide. So because of this, because of the fact that over 90% of Michigan's high priority invasive species, the species that ISN is actively working towards, or not eradicating, but managing, were introduced by way of our gardens. They were introduced intentionally, and these are called ornamental invasive species. So to combat this, many years ago, ISN created the Go Beyond Beauty program, which I am the specialist for. And this is kind of a grassroots, it's a voluntary, free, non-regulatory program where folks can choose to participate with the ultimate goal of disusing high priority ornamental invasives. And so this was originally geared towards nurseries, landscapers, designers, and garden centers to get some of these species that are still for sale. It's still legal to sell these invasive species, to get those out of the line of sale, whether it's from the production end or the demand end. And so anyone with a garden can participate in Go Beyond Beauty, and we promote the businesses that we participate with and give educational resources to folks who register as a community participant. And so, even like a law office, if they commit to not using ornamental invasives in their landscaping, can be part of Go Beyond Beauty, but also these businesses that are, potentially cutting into their bottom line by not selling high priority invasives. That's who we work with and what this program was created for originally. And so you can see we have quite a few participants with the nurseries, garden centers, landscapers, designers, and then community participants as well. So I'm gonna leave my information in the chat. If anyone has a question about Go Beyond Beauty or native plants in general, anything in this little spiel that I give you guys, I won't be sticking around to the end, but feel free to email me. I would love to chat. Next slide, please. So everyone is kind of aware, I think, for the most part, of the relationship between milkweeds and monarch butterflies, and, you know, the rush for folks to plant milkweeds for the monarch populations. And we have seen some success as of recently in their population numbers. But, you know, they need milkweed to survive. If there's no milkweed, there's no monarchs. And so I want to point out that with native species, this isn't a unique relationship between the monarchs and the milkweed. This relationship exists with several other different native insect species. Next slide. So to give a few examples, we have the double-toothed prominent on an elm leaf. We have the sphinx moth with Virginia creeper, and that's a local photo. And I think perhaps what people might be more familiar with is the northern spicebush swallowtail with the hosts of spicebush and sassafras. And these are relationships that are just as tightly linked as the monarch and the milkweed. These exist far beyond what we like to call the poster child of monarchs, with these also very gorgeous moth and butterfly species as well. And we need caterpillars, we need other insects as well, especially when we think about bird populations, because birds feed their young almost exclusively caterpillars. So it's great to have, you know, bird feeders in the winter to help sustain our year-round resident birds, but we also need to be thinking about relationships that go unseen in the natural world that aren't just highly publicized, such as the monarch and milkweed relationship. Next slide. So native plants are ones that occur naturally in a region where they evolved. And so we're talking about pre-colonization, pre-settlement, if you will. And the benefits of native plants with the environment, you know, some examples are that long living trees are effective at storing greenhouse gases, as I think is becoming more common knowledge. Many native plants require less water and are hardier, and on average more drought and cold tolerant. This isn't for every single species, but this is on average. You know, if you evolved in a region with these other species, it makes sense that, and these conditions, it makes sense that they would fare far better than something grown, you know, in the southern United States that's a non-native plant that's brought up and does well just in our short summers. Native plants also are able to provide food sources throughout winter, which not as many non-native species can, and especially invasive species, because they just simply, a lot of them simply aren't food sources, or some of the non-native plants provide nectar, and that it stops it at the food web right there at nectar. It doesn't provide the ability for insects and other things, for caterpillars to then complete that food cycle. And so since native plants co-evolved with native insects, which birds and other wildlife rely on, I just want to give an example. With our native oak trees, can support 500 caterpillar species, and that is just moths and butterflies, compared to a non-native tree like the ginkgo biloba, which, you know, is a non-native tree. It supports only 5 caterpillar species. So even though we love it and it looks great, it's not supporting habitat for insects. And just to give you kind of a perspective, for one brood of chickadees, they need 6,000 caterpillars for their one single brood. And so when we think about where are they going to get those caterpillars, it's not going to be in the plant, in the areas, it's going to be the native plants. It's not going to be the non-native areas that they're getting that from. Next slide. And this is just to really illustrate, and this information comes from researcher Doug Talmy, who is the author of Bringing Nature Home, the book that inspired the Go Beyond Beauty program in the first place. And so when we look at these species of our native woody plants, just to support butterfly and moth species, this is not even deer or other wildlife, you can see it's just such a dramatic difference in why native plants are so important when it comes to just this example here for moths and butterflies, not even other wildlife. Next slide, please. And so when we think of drought tolerant and cold tolerant, a lot of native plants have a deeper root system and are able to exist in spaces that it has evolved into, or, you know, like sandier places when you think of habitat up here, where it's because of their root systems. And when you think of all of the lawns that we have, this fescue turf, you know, you're not stabilizing much with that. You can use native plants as bank stabilization as well, and they're probably going to do a lot better than some non-native species that can't, especially woody species are good to do that as well. Next slide, please. And just do one more click, because I think I have a graphic, or that, yep, that'll pop up. So my treat here today is just to talk about the importance of native plants. And I did want to just kind of follow up with this, a reminder for folks that I know we're talking about woody species in this series here, but native plant gardens don't have to look wild. You can use cues for care and just literally in a traditional garden replace those non-native species with native species, and you could have a lot more habitat and see a lot more wildlife or butterflies or whatever your desire is for your landscape. But also to keep in mind that native plants are good for wildlife, but also they can be a tool for visuals and aesthetics. You know, people don't think, with the landscape planning, you should also think about winter interest. And I think a lot of woody species, some of that are being sold by the conservation districts, can provide a lot of winter interest or functions that other non-native plants don't have. Next slide, please. And so you have a ton of folks here that are going to speak in a minute about helping you choose and educating about the soil, water, and sun requirements of these plants and what you guys want. But I would also encourage you to look for habitat clues once you figure out what can grow in your space. Think about what you want to grow in your space. And if you're a little lost, you can also look for habitat clues such as like what native plants are in your nearby natural area, what plants are on your block, like who's growing what in your area, what works well in your township or in your county, and to kind of look above and beyond what's kind of like a traditional species to plant. Next slide, please. I think that was it, yeah, because I only had a few minutes to talk to you guys. So if you guys have any questions about Go Beyond Beauty or the importance of native plants, feel free to email me I'll drop it in the chat after this, actually, so you guys can have my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelly. Next, we're going to jump right into Reb Ratliff with the Grand Traverse Conservation District. So again, let me go back to sharing my screen here in a moment. Get you all prepared. All right, Reb, you ready?
I believe so.
Perfect. All right.
Great.
Let's.
Thank you, Shelly. Ellie, but also thank you, Shelly, for that presentation. Always great. My name is Reb Ratliff. I'm with the Grand Traverse Conservation District. I am a parkland steward here. I've been here for about 10 years, and a lot of my experience that's applicable to the workshop comes from a lot of parkland restoration work that we've done throughout the 10 parklands that I manage in Grand Traverse County. With that, I'm going to dive right in. I'm also looking at about 10 minutes here, and pardon me if it comes off as a little basic to some of you, and if it also sounds like I'm reading to you at times, but I'm going to try to keep things moving. Hopefully there's some sort of a tidbit that kind of, you know, catches your attention or resonates with you or sparks a greater question that you might need to look into for greater success. So with that, next slide, please. The 4 things I'm going to go over are before ordering your seedlings, handling your seedlings, proper planting techniques, and then some follow-up maintenance. Next slide, please. So before ordering your seedlings, what are your goals? Most of you are attending tonight's workshop because you already kind of have an idea in mind of what you might be interested in trying to accomplish. Some common plant attributes are, wildlife habitat and forage, windbreak, landscape beauty, shade, visual, audio barriers, and eventual timber harvest. A lot of different reasons why many of you might be here tonight. So before ordering your seedlings, you've got to know what type of soil conditions you're dealing with. This is one of the most important things to consider when selecting the appropriate species. Is it a wetland, lowland, upland site? Shelley mentioned that, what was the phrase she used for kind of site indicators or something to that effect? For using the existing surrounding natural vegetation is often one of the best ways to know what might be suitable for your site. Mother Nature does know best. So if it is a site where there is some natural colonization, use those species as one of the tools in your toolkit to determine what might thrive well in your site. The MSU Extension offices sell soil kits, which I encourage you to consider, especially for larger projects where you're going to be, investing a lot of time and resources and money. These kits are available to purchase at their brick and mortar or online. I believe that the offices in Benzie, Manistee, Leelanau, and Grand Traverse County all have them available for pickup locally. They run about $25 a piece. There are two different types. There's a home lawn and garden, and there's a crop and field. Both types of kits will give you that list of results there. So, your soil texture is going to be, is it a silt, a loam, clay, silt down there twice. A clay, knowing if there's a lot of clay content in there, you're going to know it's not going to drain well. If it's a super sandy loam, you're going to know it's going to drain pretty well. The results also touch on the pH. Ideally, you're going to want between like that 5 to 7 range, which is slightly acidic. It'll also let you know the nutrient levels of potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. Those are your limiting nutrients. There's an organic matter percentage provided, but most importantly, it will provide personalized recommendations for fertilizer and pH modifications. It's great to be able to, in fact, last time I filled out one of these soil test kits was for a grassland wildflower restoration project, actually. It was not seedlings, but kind of a good success story. We had to get the soil tested, and we were low and on a couple of limiting nutrients, and needed to amend the soil, and we sought some natural fertilizer options to get the soil to that level of what was deemed ideal for grassland and wildflower establishment. And of many attempts at such restoration projects, I would say that the one large scale project we did where we did get a soil test and we did amend that soil with it was a bone meal and a potash to get up to that recommended level of limiting nutrients. There's a lot of factors involved, but I would say that that restoration site was by far one of the most successful restoration efforts I've seen, and I would contribute a good portion of that to that soil amendment following that soil test. Next slide, please. Some stuff that I'm sure Ellie and Tom will go over a little bit in a little bit more detail. Of course, you're going to have to consider sunlight conditions and requirements. The Conservation District websites and most tree and shrub seedling catalogs will tell you the most common things are, soil type, sun exposure, those type of things. You're just going to want to know what your site conditions are so that you can properly align those up. One thing I think is underestimated is the impact of wind-prone areas on trying to establish small seedlings. Wind really does increase the loss of water from trees into the atmosphere and tends to dry out site conditions. So if you are up on the top of a, kind of a bald hill or something, and you've got high winds, you're gonna probably want to try to consider some of those upland species that are a little bit more drought tolerant, and you're gonna probably need to keep them watered too, because that wind can have quite the effect on your little babies. The timing of your plantings, again, because this is geared mostly towards seedlings, a lot of nurseries won't sell you bare root seedlings outside of the November to April range. Some will, of course, but mostly they're just looking at ensuring that they're providing them to you in a dormant state so that those seedlings aren't experience as much transplant shock when they are pulled from the ground at the nursery and then moved to their new location. And then again, the bare root seedlings, like I mentioned, are sensitive, so you can't really go wrong with power and numbers. I always say plant at least twice the amount that you hope to establish in the end. They are relatively affordable compared to purchasing larger potted or bald burlap trees. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and even if you think you've covered everything, sometimes you're just better off trying to going with the power in numbers approach. And don't get frustrated. I always want to encourage that. Don't get frustrated if a lot of your little seedlings don't live the first year. Next slide, please. Handling your seedlings, keep the roots moist. If you purchase your seedlings from a conservation district, they're going to come packaged and typically with a material inside that's going to retain moisture around those roots for you. You can use sawdust, peat moss, shredded paper, a product called TerraSorb. And if you're not going to plant them right away, make sure you store them in a cool, dark, dry location. Ideal temperatures are 33 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Ideally, you're not throwing them into the trunk of your car or somewhere where they can become super warm. You don't want to have them out in full sun. Plants will be trying to metabolize or come out of dormancy. It's best to keep them in a cool, dark spot. The seedlings often come from conservation districts in tightly bundled little packages, and especially, it does vary from species to species, but it's a pretty simple point, a little obvious, but do be careful pulling those seedlings apart from one another, because you need every little bit of advantage you can get, and the less root damage, the better. And another thing I think is critical is soaking the bare root seedlings in water for anywhere from 10-15 minutes up to, I think, just an hour or two. I've heard that you don't want to do it overnight, but some soaking prior to going right into the ground really fills those roots up to their maximum capacity before that soil, which will pull that moisture out of those roots immediately. You just want to be able to give it the best chance possible. Avoid sun and wind exposure. Bare roots are incredibly susceptible to drying out. When they dry out, the microbial communities on the roots can die, and those microbes are really important for nutrient uptake and immune defense. And I've also heard that direct exposure to UVB light is known to negatively impact root function and growth. So even that short amount of time you're transferring them from their package or your bucket or whatever you have and into the ground, you want to make that a seamless process. Don't have them lying on the ground, exposed to the sun or the wind. Keep them covered and make sure they go into the ground as closely to the condition that they came from the nursery as possible. And if you can't get them in right away, the process of temporarily planting the seedlings, if you're a few weeks away, or if you even need to heal them in from over the winter. If you want to go to the next slide, please, Ellie. The process of healing them in. Oh, Ellie, next slide, please. The process of healing in a group of plants. The idea is if you say you have several dozen plants that you just, maybe you're holding on to them until some family can help you plant them, or you got busy, or if it's a fall planting and they just didn't get in the ground. Healing them in a row where is basically just increasing the amount of surface area available to each of the roots to make that contact with the soil versus placing a bundle into just one hole, filling it up and leaving a little bit of air cavities and not full contact with the soil, around all portions of the roots for an extended period of time. So this is a process I've tried once with about 150 or 200 aspens that kind of just ran out of time at the end of the season and healed them in a row. And sure enough, next spring we dug them out and the roots were a little bit tangled up. You had to take some time to separate them out, but it was a nice process to be able to just temporarily plant them and then come back to them in a later period. Next slide, please. Planting your seedlings, especially if you live in a more urban setting, you're going to want to call mist dig to ensure that there aren't any underground utilities present. I've called mist dig maybe a half a dozen times over the few years for a couple of projects, and they say give them several days notice. My experiences are that they'll come out and mark utilities within about 48 hours. And it is a free service. It's better to be safe than sorry. Also, avoid digging holes too far in advance. Again, that just goes with moisture loss. We don't want to, even if you plan on watering your seedlings in immediately after you plant them, there's a lot of evaporation that's going to occur out of that soil pit as you dig the hole. Some people like to do a bunch of digging, go back later, and then plug the seedlings in and plant the seedling, bounce to each hole, plant the seedling. I don't really encourage that. You can dig a hole and just minutes later be able to tell that it's drying out just by the color of the sidewalls of your hole. The depth of the hole for your seedling, you're going to want to look at your root system prior to digging your hole and dig up a hole suitable as the size of that root. Aim for a couple inches deeper than the length of your roots. If it's a large scale project, obviously you might want to consider a gas powered auger or a planting bar, which is going to plant your root system on a 2-dimensional plane versus more of a 3-dimensional plane. If you're able, where you're able to kind of dangle your seedling over the hole so that those roots are kind of more in a 3D fashion and kind of spaced out from one another. But those planting bars are what like large scale forest restoration projects are using, and they do have success with those too from an efficiency standpoint. You always want to try to install the seedling at the depth of which it grew. Most species, it's actually pretty easy to tell by looking at the area of the root crown, right above right above the root system, there's usually a discoloration where you can tell where that soil grade was at the nursery. You don't want to add the stem of the seedling too deep, and you don't want any of that root crown above ground. That will definitely cause stress on the seedling, and it'll lose some soil or some root moisture from that exposure into the air. Conifers are especially vulnerable to stem rot if they're planted too deep. I've seen this firsthand a couple times. I know white pine, red pine are a big seller for our conservation district. And that's one point I usually always try to emphasize to folks is target that depth at which it grew at the nursery. Go ahead, Ellie, next slide, please. I just noticed that I missed a bullet on that last slide of the need to remove any competing vegetation from around the seedling. It's really important, especially turf grass, obviously really thick, shallow rhizome grasses are gonna take a lot of the sun's energy and a lot of the water, and not allow it to get down to the plant. So kind of that veg-free barrier around the seedling is important. You can add some compost or organics into your soil if you have a sandy site. Organics really do help retain a lot of moisture in the soil. If you do add compost, like a dairy do or something, you're going to want to make sure you kind of jumble it in with those local soils so that it's more of a homogeneous mix and you don't potentially cause what they call nutrient shock to the plant, where if it's transplanted into a soil setting where it's much richer than what it was grown in at the nursery. The TerraSort product I mentioned earlier, that is a product we sell at the Grand Traverse Conservation District here. It's a synthetic polymer similar to the product they use in baby diapers. And the idea behind this is it will retain moisture around the roots during periods of drought, and it'll last for years too. So even after, if it does go dry, it's kind of like a small granular, almost powdery substance. And even if it goes dry during an extreme drought, the next time it rains, it's gonna swell up and retain that moisture again around those roots of that seedling. And also shredded paper and peat moss also works well. I know that's what we typically pack our seedlings in for our seedling sale. And consider using mulch. So especially if you do have surrounding vegetation that's wanting to where you have your seedling planted, if you have the ability to mulch it with a couple inches of say wood chips, that really does help reduce the amount of evapotranspiration, and water and moisture is one of the key things to keeping your seedling viable and alive. Next slide, please. A nice little NRCS diagram here of just some common planting problems. The two highlighted in yellow are the ones that I tend to see like our volunteers at like our volunteer events do the most. A lot of even like a 12 to 18 inch seedling will often have like an 18 to 24 inch long root system, depending on the species. Sometimes you're almost, if you don't think you can dig a hole that deep, you're better off just taking some scissors or hand pruners and shortening up the tips of those roots before doing something like that diagram that says a U or J root. The tips of those roots pointing up are gonna make that plant kind of want to grow those tips of the roots upward and put a lot of stress on the plants. Obviously, you don't want to plant them too shallow or too deep. I touched on the conifer stem rot a little bit. I see some people putting all their weight onto seedlings to really pack it in there to make sure especially those kind of soft trunk conifers. They don't exactly want to stand up stiff, so people will bury them a little deep and then put some added pressure around them. But again, you're risking that stem rot in the trunk, and then you're also potentially compacting that soil enough to where you're not going to get good rainwater infiltration or any water infiltration, depending on how you're watering it. So general rule of thumb, I just say push down with your hands quite firm, but definitely don't need to stamp them in too hard. And then just, you're just kind of ensuring that you're not leaving air pockets in there too. And if you water it in right away, you can typically tell whether or not you had some cavities down there, because you'll see some sinking of some of the soil. So just be mindful of that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Some follow-up maintenance, watering your seedlings. If it's not lack of water or deer, it's usually those two things in my experience, if it's a properly selected species. One rule of thumb is 1 gallon of water per seedling per week during the growing season. You do want to be careful not to oversaturate, of course. It's kind of the same principles for house plants. You just got to make sure you have the right sunlight, and you're not overwatering or underwatering your species. But you'll know if you're overwatering. The browse protectors, deer, rabbits and rodents are a little bit tougher to keep out than deer. We do sell, the Conservation District in Grand Traverse does sell tree tubes. We've got some really fancy ones. They do run, I think Ellie and Tom might be touching on this later, but they do run $7.50 a piece, but they're super high quality, and they come with the mesh netting for the top of the tube to keep birds out. Comes with the fiberglass stake to slip through the protector to keep it in place. And if you're investing time and energy into the seedlings, you want to just give them the best chance you can. Garlic sticks, I've heard some moderate success with these. I've never personally tried them, but there are garlic sticks that you can latch on that supposedly keep away deer and rabbits. And then there's also some sprays that you can use as well. And in terms of fertilizing, also I've heard a little bit of mixed opinions from professionals on whether or not fertilizing seedlings is a good idea. If you are going to, definitely only use if you're going to use synthetic fertilizers, make sure they're formulated specifically for seedlings and don't exceed the rates. And then if some natural fertilizer options, blood meal for nitrogen, potash for potassium, bone meal for calcium. These are things you can find online. You can find them in bulk if you do enough online shopping around. I'm happy to help you source some of that if you're looking for larger amounts. I've sourced upwards of 1,000 pounds at a time. And so there's some more affordable options out there. And again, don't become discouraged, just continue to learn. I know that of the tens and tens of thousands of seedlings I've planted, I've had thousands and thousands not make it. And I just try not to get discouraged and kind of live with that power in numbers mantra of mine. So next slide, please. Just wanted to throw this out there. We do have a couple spring work bees where if you want to come out and practice planting some seedlings and see some of these species firsthand, just to get out on the park, hike some trails, and be on the banks of the Boardman River. Two of our parks, the Brown Bridge Quiet Area and the Natural Education Reserve, each have the Boardman River flowing through them. Beautiful landscapes. We'll be planting down along the banks where the former dam impoundments were. The Brown Bridge Dam was removed in 2012, and it's nice seeing how things have kind of reclaimed out there. Natural Education Reserve, the 2 dams within that park were removed in 2017 and 18. Little less natural succession has occurred there compared to Brown Bridge. Really interesting landscape to watch things grow up. But great way to celebrate Earth Day and Arbor Day, and to practice planting some of these seedlings and getting to know the seedlings a little better. And that's it. That's all I got for you guys.
Thank you, Reb. That was great. Here we're gonna jump right into Maddie's. And so next we've got Maddie Baroli with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. And then at the very end, me and Tom are gonna be presenting about species. So if you've got any questions, save them, because we will help you all out at the very end. But Reb, thank you very much. Maddie, I'm gonna get your PowerPoint pulled up.
Yeah, thanks, Reb. I feel like even for people who have planted trees every year for many years, there's always a lot. Like, I know I learned definitely some new things from going over the basics there. So much appreciated. My name is Maddie Baroli, and I was formerly an intern with the Leelanau Conservation District, and supported former District Forester Cameron Ross. And now I work with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science as a climate adaptation specialist. So today I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce the Assisted Tree Range Expansion Project, which is an ongoing community science project that I started with the conservation districts in 2019. So it's now going into its 3rd season. And then the reason I'm doing this quick overview before handing it off to Ellie and Tom is because in their presentation, they're actually going to cover the details on the different tree species that are offered through the seedling sales as part of this project. So just to kick it off, since it's in the name, I'll go ahead and define assisted range expansion, which is the intentional movement of species to areas just outside of their established range in response to our changing climate. So it's important to note trees do have the capacity to migrate into new areas on their own in response to the changing climate. And in fact, there is evidence of this actually taking place over the last 30 years. So a lot of tree species populations are migrating to the Northwest. However, with the pace of climate change, coupled with the fact that we have a very fragmented forest landscape, this makes it very difficult for the natural range expansion of tree species to really occur in our modern context. So basically the premise of this project is to get people to help out by planting species that are projected to have new suitable habitat in our region, and then monitor their trees and report some simple annual growth and health measurements so we can really get a sense of how they're doing over time. And by starting to establish a more local population of these species now, something really supportive we can do across our landscape that will support the resilience of our forests by increasing forest diversity and offsetting some of the widespread tree die-offs and disease and climate stressors that we're seeing over time. Next slide. Okay, you're gonna have to click a few times for this one. So before I get into the details on how to participate in the project and share the species that we're recommending, I just want to share a little bit about our region's forests and our changing climate. So you may or may not be aware that there are a variety of disturbances that are really adding up to drastically impact the health of our region's forests. So you kind of saw these pictures pop up here. We have beech bark disease, oak wilt, large storms and extreme weather events. Obviously, deer herbivory can really impact tree regeneration, and we struggle with invasive plants as well. So really, the main ecological implications of these things are a loss in species diversity over time, an increase in tree mortality or unhealthy trees, increasing levels of invasive species, stifled regeneration of younger trees, which provide an important habitat and food, but also, make up the future forest canopy. And then, of course, we have impacts to wildlife and overall biodiversity, as well as, a host of cultural and socioeconomic impacts resulting from these stressors as well. Next slide. And then, of course, you have the influence of our changing climate, which is really just serving to exacerbate all of these other stressors. So you might have seen some of the most recent reports that have come out of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change about, the different planetary thresholds we are butting up against with the pace of our changing climate. But these are some more regionally specific projections, specifically for Northwest Michigan. So over the past century, much of our region has already warmed between 1 and 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and the temperature is expected to increase between 2 and 8 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of the next century, with that being concentrated in the winter and summer months. And then we're also expecting intense precipitation events to become more frequent and severe. And already seeing indicators really that our ecosystems are changing in tandem with the climate. So leaf out and flowering dates have already moved about a week earlier, and growing seasons are projected to lengthen substantially. Dry soils in the growing season are leading to drought stress, and very importantly, winters are becoming less severe, which is really allowing forest pests to reproduce more and expand their range, so they end up killing and stressing more trees. Next slide. Okay, so that's a lot to take in, and I'm sure maybe you've taken notice of some of those impacts. But the important thing to realize is that there are options to support forests, and planting trees and doing some assisted range expansion is just one example of some of those opportunities. So what you see here are the main criteria we have for choosing, the species that are a part of this project. So really the first key consideration was using US Forest Service data and climate change modeling to determine which species are predicted to do well in our region under future climate conditions. So that was kind of our starting point. But then in addition to that, we also wanted to make sure we were selecting species that were going to have the most success in our area and with our landowners. So after consulting with our district forester at the time, Kama Ross, and our natural resources specialist, Tom Adams, who you'll hear from, these were some of the other key things that we wanted to consider when picking our species. So we really wanted to choose species that are not preferred browse for deer, which is pretty hard. So there's no guarantee that these species are, deer proof. But we also wanted to make sure that the species we selected were not preferred hosts for the Asian longhorn beetle, which is a pretty devastating forest pest that is not currently in Michigan, but does surround us on all sides throughout the Midwest. So kind of foreseeing that as potentially being a future problem, these species are not hosts for that beetle. And then, yeah, really, we just wanted to provide a good distribution of options for trees that are suitable for different site conditions, knowing that you all are going to have, different needs for what kind of trees you're planting. And then, of course, they all have distinct wildlife benefits, and there are a few good options as well for planting more in like a yard setting. Next slide. And so these are the 6 species that we kicked off HREP with. So we have shagbark hickory, tulip tree, swamp white oak, hackberry, black gum, and sassafras. And then if you want to click one more time, Ellie, we're adding the American sycamore to this list as well this year. So you'll see that available through the seedling sale. And people have had some good success with these species for sure. But I do want to emphasize again that especially since we are experimenting with the range expansion of these species, site selection does really become important for trying to ensure the survival of each of these species. So Reb did a great job of covering that, and the ideal site conditions for each of the species are described on the HREP website, which I'll share. But you can also email Ellie or myself, or have Ellie out for a site visit to walk your property and discuss where it might be best to plant these species. All right, so basically, in order to participate in the community science side of things, if you're planning on ordering any of these species through the Conservation District, I would invite you to sign up, or just basically get in touch with Ellie or myself, or go to the project website and message us. And yeah, we'll kind of then just basically, we'll put you on a newsletter, and yeah, get you involved with the project. So once you plant the trees, you'll basically create a unique ID code for each of them, and then just record that on a tag. And then we just ask you to basically send in once a year, send in measurements related to the tree's growth and health, according to a simple set of instructions that we have on the website, and that will also provide a printed copy of when you pick up your trees. So it's really just a matter of pretty much measuring the height of the seedling, and then kind of sharing some notes on what you might notice about its leaf out, just kind of how it's doing, if you've noticed any, well, most importantly, whether or not the seedling is still alive or dead. And so, yeah, we're collecting that information for all of these trees. Yeah, next slide. So this is just some screenshots from the project website itself. You can, on the website, you can revisit information on each tree species, and yeah, see project updates. You can also see this map, which shows many of the trees planted as part of the project by both private landowners and community groups in public places. And then this is also where you can submit your data on the trees. And so, yeah, you can do that through this simple form, but we'll also be sharing a way that you can share data with us that bypasses the website if you just want to share it directly with us via email, or whatever is really simplest for you. Next slide. All right, so if you're interested in the project, definitely check out the website. You can also learn more in this great video produced by Joe Vandermeulen of Nature Change. And he filmed this for Kama and I last spring, and it gives a brief overview of the project and invites people to participate. So you can find that directly on the naturechange.org website, or by going to this YouTube link. So I can share both of those as well. And here are just some great photos to wrap things up. Some photos from the last 2 planting seasons. Over 2,000 trees have been planted through HREP so far, and we've expanded to partnering with over 5 conservation districts now, including on the other side of the state in Sheboygan and Rogers City. And we've also worked with a handful of other community organizations, such as the Historic Barnes Park, the City of Frankfurt, the Congregational Summer Assembly, Ruby Ellen Centennial Farm, and others. So it's been great to see, yeah, the participation in the community so far. So yeah, Ellie and Tom are gonna talk about each of the species a little bit more. But if you have any other questions about them, you can also reach out to me directly at my email here. And if you want to share your email with me, I can sign you up for the newsletter as well if you're interested. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. That was great. So me and Tom are about to continue the fire hose of information. So we're gonna go right into our PowerPoint on talking about the different tree species. So here, let me get us all booted up. So I'm Ellie Johnson. I am the district forester for the Tri-County Conservation Districts, Grand Traverse, Benzie, and Leelanau. And then this is Tom Adams of Leelanau Conservation District, who is our natural resource specialist. And let's show you our beautiful PowerPoint that we made. All right, so We are talking about the different species, like describing them real quick for you, and then some of their ideal site conditions, like where, as Reb was talking about, like what their like soils are super important, how wet and dry a space is, how much sunlight a space gets. All that's going to impact if a seedling's going to thrive in that space. We did make this presentation catered towards all 3 conservation districts, but all the species that we're talking about aren't necessarily sold at every single conservation district. So in the bottom right corner of every species slide that you're about to see, and I'll highlight this when the first one shows up, you will see a little symbol for Benzie, Grand Traverse, and Leelanau. That'll help you keep track of who sells what. And all 3 of the conservation districts have online order forms. At the very end of this, I can share the links to order in the chat box. You can go right to those spaces and put in an order if you'd like. Again, this is a fundraiser for all 3 conservation districts. So we made this presentation for landowners in all 3 counties, but I implore you to support your local conservation district. But if there's a species that you want that another conservation district has, by all means, please place an order. All of us are just trying to plant more trees, right? So, Tom, you want to take it away with our first couple conifers?
White pine, Michigan state tree, and it's rightfully so that was picked as the state tree because it grows in so many places. It'll grow on a dry site, it'll grow on sand, it'll grow on clay, it'll grow on a wet site, and you'll find it in all those places. And it gets very tall. It was one of the native trees that was here that made Michigan so popular because mainly the Chicago is built out of the white pine from Michigan here. Wildlife use it, and many birds, and it's also used for lumber. It's very beautiful lumber. I've built some buildings out of it myself. You wait a while, it isn't a fast growing tree, but enjoy it, go for it.
And so again, before I go on, so the bottom right, so that first symbol is Benzie, and then it's Grand Traverse and it's Leelanau. So as we flip through all these species, you'll see which conservation districts offer which species.
The other one that was found along with the white pine was the red pine. It has more limitations. I have personal experience with it. It likes to grow on sand, to loamy sand. It'll grow on somewhat of a wet area, but generally it likes a sandy area. We've used those with the conservation district in windbreaks, and usually we're not that successful. They never grow that big. They like to have a sheltered area to grow. So if you can put it somewhere where the wind isn't blowing a whole lot, it's going to do a whole lot better. And it was again used for lumber, and it's also used for paper.
All right, white spruce really likes having full sun. It can grow in wet and dry areas, from sandy to loamy sandy soils. I tend to see it a lot on the edges of wetlands when I'm going on different hikes, especially some of the locations that Grand Traverse Conservation District owns. It's going to grow to be like 90 feet tall or so, and it offers really good wildlife cover, especially the younger trees that are really filled in with the branches on the bottom. In the winter months, a lot of wildlife likes to go between different conifer patches for protection. And this one's also used for lumber, and sometimes it is used for Christmas tree plantations. White cedar very much like some wetter areas. It can grow in drier sites, but I usually see this one in wetland spaces. It needs some full sun to get started, but once it's going, it can be overtopped by other trees and sort of persist in that sort of shaded space. It's not a very fast growing tree, and it's not going to be one of the larger trees that we sell. It's going to be, so that's what I mean. Like it can get overtopped. It can persist in that mid-story space for a long time. But a lot of wildlife likes white cedar, especially different songbird species. And this one's also, the lumber is used for various things like fence posts and stuff.
Balsam fir is one of my favorites too. I can remember the first time that I was seeking to plant some, and it's pretty exciting. And it likes to grow in the full sun It will tolerate some shade when it's eventually established. It will grow on a wide range of soils from sand, clay to muck. And it will grow on some dry sites. A lot of Christmas tree growers will plant this one. And again, it's because it's a native tree. And the growth, 40 to 50 feet. And wildlife cover, yes, definitely. You'll often find chickadees bopping around in this tree here. And it is very fragrant when touched. And the other thing that I'm delighted with is seeing the cones on them. If you don't usually see them on the lower branches, you see them in the upper branches. They kind of stand up as candles, and you don't see a balsam fir cone very often on the ground. It'd be one that was immature that the squirrel had chewed off. So you're not going to see those laying around on somebody's shelf. Next tree. American larch is another one that's a pretty exciting tree for me. This one here likes to grow in the sun. It gets established in the sun, and it does like wet sites. Our native one doesn't do that well up on dry sites, but if you have something wet, they will grow, and it'll grow in a wide range of soils from sand, clay to muck. 60 feet total height. Again, beautiful wildlife cover. Use some for lumber. It's very durable with the soil. It's sometimes used for fence posts because it doesn't rot very fast. And then another name for it is tamarack. I'm especially excited about the cones. If you're ever out around these trees in the spring and these cones come on or bloom, and they're just unbelievably beautiful. So enjoy. By the way, this tree, it looks like a conifer. Well, it is a conifer, but it loses its needles in the fall. And the picture there shows it being yellow. I've had people say, what's wrong with them? All of them are dying. Well, it's just, they're losing their needles or leaves.
Some other conifers that a couple of the conservation districts sell. Grand Traverse also sells black spruce. That's another, hangs out in wetter soils. It's also a slower growing tree. And Leelanau Conservation District sells jack pine. That one you see a lot. I've seen big patches of it in the central part of the state. It's more in like a oak open complex where like fire used to go through. But they're also the prime habitat for Kirkland's warbler. But those are some other conifers that are for sale too. Now let's talk about some hardwoods. The black cherry is a full sun species, or a pioneer species just means whenever there's a disturbance that happens in a forest, this is one of the typical species that will move into that canopy open space before anything else. So it's a full sun species, and it's gonna grow pretty quickly when it's younger. But its fruits are used by a lot of different wildlife species. It supports a wide range of diversity with things. And I think it's really pretty. It's got this on adult black cherry trees that has this sort of like burnt cocoa crisp bark. It's all these like little dark brown plates. And apparently this was something that Shelley actually taught me. So like back in her presentation, right? So black cherry is a prunus species. It's part of that genus. And prunus species in general support 456 different butterfly and moth species. So this is a great choice if you're thinking about diversity of different organisms from like the food chain perspective.
Red maple, native tree, often confused with the hybrid red maples. And it's a beautiful tree. And it likes full sun, soils, a wide range of soil, but most often found naturally in wet areas. They will grow on upland sites. What would we need? Considerable amount of water to get them started, grow up to 60 feet. And most wildlife eat some part of this tree or use some part of this tree. They are used for lumber. I even happened to get a curly maple log out of one time. And wildlife, when I think of a red maple tree, I picture grouse picking the buds off them in the wintertime. They use them as food. And you can also use this tree for maple syrup production.
Great.
Sugar maple next. And this wood is a little bit harder. And I used to tap trees for maple syrup, and I'm very fond of maples. It grows in a wide range of soils, and it grow up to 90 feet. There's one on some family property. I believe that it's around 160 years old. Again, it's used for lumber. It's good for wildlife, for nesting and cover. They're a very long-lived tree, and they have a beautiful foliage in the fall, just like the other one, the other maple.
All right, red oaks are a full sun species. They would prefer to be in well-drained soils. They like any oak species, they support a lot of different wildlife as far as like birds and small mammals and stuff. A lot of the different things eat the acorns. Something to note though, members of the red oak family, or like a red oak group, are more susceptible to the disease oak wilt, which is a fungal disease that can be transmitted above ground by different little picnic beetles whenever a red oak is injured, or when a red oak tree is infected with this fungus, it can pass it to its neighbors. It is a disease that you can prevent, as far as don't be pruning your red oak trees in the summer, but this is something to keep in mind with this one. However, it is good to have in the matrix of a forest because it does support a lot of different wildlife species. Similarly, white oak also would like to have a lot of sun. It also prefers being in well-drained soils, but especially like really sandy soils. They are very slow growing, and they're used for lumber, but also for whiskey barrels, right? So very important. And wildlife use those acorns obviously for food, but this definitely houses a bunch of species. And again, so back in Shelley's presentation, if you caught this, so apparently Quercus oak species, they support 534 butterfly and moth species. So oaks are super important for overall ecosystem diversity. Yeah, do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to talk about it?
American chestnut, offered by the Benzie District. The chestnut blight took a lot of them out, but there's still some that'll grow here. And then there's the mountain ash, which you don't find many of them naturally around here, but you find them more in the Upper Peninsula. And it has some wildlife value also. It's a beautiful tree. The paper birch, everybody's pretty familiar with it. There's many variations of it, but it's a beautiful tree. Waking aspen, another name is Quercus alba is the Latin name, where that name comes from. And it's a beautiful tree. It grows quite fast, relatively short-lived, lives somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 years. Again, the paper birch, I think maybe there's a duplication there. I just talked about it. The downy serviceberry is almost the same as the other serviceberries. There's some variation in them, but you can't hardly tell the difference between them. I will talk more about that when I get to the other one there further in the presentation. And in American beech, this tree feeds tremendous amounts of animals. There's no end to it. Chipmunks, squirrels, partridge, the list goes on. And there's no end to it. And it has a disease now that's taken, beech bark disease, it's taken some of them out, and it's important that they be replanted. So if indeed you're interested, you can get them through the Leelanau Conservation District.
All right, so again, this is the species offered with the HREP project. So again, the Assisted Tree Range Expansion Project. So we're taking some tree species that are found more in southern Michigan, and based on all those different characteristics that Maddie was talking about, we've selected those to try in this community science experiment to plant them up in our neck of the woods. No pun intended there. So a tulip poplar is actually in the magnolia family. You can kind of tell by looking at its cute little flower. I love them. They are like a lime green, yellow color, and then they've got some bright orange down in the base. But obviously they've got those when you were a little kid having to draw a tulip. That's what the leaves look like, at least to me. They are a sun or partial sun tree, and they really thrive in canopy gaps because as far as hardwoods go, they are relatively fast growing. I was just in grad school in South Carolina, and I saw a ton of tulip poplars all the time. And so they'd really like to capitalize on those canopy gaps. So that's why it's like they will thrive in full sun. But if it's sort of like a dappled sunlight because it's just an opening in the forest, this is also a good place to sort of slide one of these trees into. They like moist sand. They're pretty open to a lot of different soils. It can be more on the moist side. They're not really going to do super well on a dry upland site, so like not on the tippy top of a hill. But for a lot of slopes and like down in some bottomlands, they'll be relatively happy. And like a lot of other things we've talked about, so this one supports, those big flowers support a lot of different pollinators, and then all those different insects support a lot of birds.
Black gum, it's a beautiful tree. The first one I was introduced to was in a biology class when I was in college, and it was on a sandy site. It had the water table down there, somewhere around 3 to 5 feet, and it was just vibrant red. And they like to grow in the partial sun. It grows on, again, moist soils up to 50 to 60 feet. Most wildlife use some parts of this tree. And again, it's extremely red in the fall. Where I've seen these naturally is down near Muskegon, Grand Haven. There's quite a lot of them. And this tree goes by other names that some people may be familiar with. It grows by tupelo, sour gum, and pepperidge. I first learned it as a pepperidge tree. Black gum is the name in most of the books. Swamp white oak is another very big favorite of mine. First ones I saw is on the Muskegon River, and they're just monstrous trees. The name suggests that it likes wet areas, and indeed it does, but it will grow on upland sites and do very well. The survivability of this tree is extremely high. Compared to a lot of trees, there's a higher percentage of them that survive. It's in there with the burl also. It grows up to 50, 60 feet. It's used for lumber and some veneer. They don't really distinguish the wood from the white oak from the other white oaks. There's only about a pound difference per cubic foot. And acorns are tasty. Dry them out, try them yourself, and they feed many other wildlife.
I think we've said that like every tree is our favorite tree. So this is a hackberry. It's also prefers full sun, and this is another one that can grow in lowlands and uplands, but where it really is happy is in moist calcareous soils. So that just means that it's a soil high in calcium. So it's like an ancient ocean bed. So that's where like a lot of like shells and different things have built up, right? So those soils are going to be more basic versus acidic. So they're going to be a higher pH. But they, like others, so they've got a fruit similar to cherries. So it's a favorite food for birds, and especially into the winter because they kind of hold on to those fruits. But it's not really much of a timber tree, but it's a good one to have, again, as far as increasing the diversity of your space, in that it's supporting different organisms into seasons where there really isn't a lot of food available to them. Sassafras, and again, we're going to say it is a really cute tree. I mean, look at those little dinosaur foot leaves, and then some of them look like mittens. So they're trimorphic leaves, so they've got different shapes. Sometimes they're just a single one, or they've got a little thumb, or they've got 3 little nubs. They're a full sun tree, and they're another one where they're not going to get super big. They're more in the mid-story, so you're not really going to see much of a canopy of sassafras. They grow in most soils, but so they're going to prefer if they're more stony, composed of more stony features, and if they're well-drained sand. They're another one, they don't really have much timber value, though the leaves smell like lemons, and there was a lot of different Native American uses for the bark and the roots, and we make I guess we used to make root beer from the roots of sassafras trees.
Shagbark hickory is another one of my favorite. There's hardly a tree that isn't my favorite. I was pretty excited the first time I discovered one. It was down in Ottawa County, and since then I've been trying to grow them ever since. And it likes to grow in sun, the partial sun. It has a very deep taproot. We've learned a few things with having them in the program. That the first ones we got were 2 O's, which means that there were 2 years in the nursery bed and 1 year out. And since then we've moved to one. I'm saying it wrong. 2 O's, 1 O's, and we're having more success with them. The ones that we planted last year are surviving. The big percentage of them survived. First year, not very many of them because the trees were too big and we were cutting off most of the root. It likes to have a dry site, and it also likes rich bottom soils up to 90 to 100 feet. Great for wildlife. The squirrels especially like them, and they're very tasty. The nuts are just excellent, and the wood is light brown, and it's a lot of toughness in it, hardness in it. And my kitchen cabinets are made out of hickory. They're beautiful. Sycamore is more of a southern tree again too. A lot of you that grew up north here and then went south and discovered, what is that scaly tree? Well, that was sycamore. I'm doing a little research on it. I find that they're grow to be extremely old. There's some that is known to be as much as 800 years old, and where they have a tendency to be hollow, but being that they live that long, their likelihood of capturing carbon is much greater. 60, 80 feet height, and they're sometimes used for pallets and things like that, or making woodware like wooden spatulas and that type of thing. It's difficult to work with, but a small piece to make something like that, it turns out pretty well.
Okay, so this is the last category of species that we're going to talk about. And so all the conservation districts also offer some different shrubs and small tree species, such as black elderberry. So this is a full sun or potentially a partial sun, but a lot of the shrub species that the conservation districts offer they thrive more in full sun situations. This one though, it's gonna like more moist soils. It could potentially grow to be around 10 feet tall. And obviously a bunch of birds really love those fruits. And apparently, so this is a Tom note, that you can make jam, jelly, and wine out of those. I'm sure you all have enjoyed one of those products at least once. It's very good. And American hazelnut's another one, again, so like the full sun or partial sun. This one is pretty good with a range of different soil moisture. It can put up with drier spaces. It can be kind of on the fringes of wetlands. This one is it's going to be shorter than black elderberry at its highest. And they tend to live in colonies, so they're going to be in groups. This is another one that squirrels really like because, I mean, look at those hazelnuts. And they taste excellent. You know that for a fact?
I know that for a fact. I have a lot of experience with them. The black chokeberry, I remember these from when I was a kid, is that the partridges sit on the limbs and pick the berries off them. They don't grow that high, 3 to 6 foot high. Sun to partial sun, and where I first was introduced was in a fence row. And they do well in those sort of conditions. The soil moist, well drained, grows 3 to 6 feet. And again, most wildlife use them. I've picked some off and tasted them myself, and yes, you could make jams and jellies out of them. Nanny berry almost looks the same, but this plant grows to be quite high, 20 to 30 feet in sun to shade, moist to dry sand or clay, and the seeds are used again by many wildlife.
9 bark is sort of an interesting one. As it grows, it's got this sort of like the bark sort of exfoliates itself. So like its layers sort of peel back. So that's where it gets its name from. So you can see along the branches, it's pretty cool looking that it's just sort of like fraying off a little bit. They are, again, with most of our shrubs, they're more going to thrive more in the sun, but this one can persist in the shade. It can be in a range of soil moistures. So it can be in wetter soils. It can hang out in drought, like drier, sandy soils. It's a medium-sized shrub, so it's going to be like 3 to 9 feet tall at max. And these flowers, especially, they support a lot of pollinators. So there's a lot of insects that like to hang out with ninebark. And red osier dogwood is also one who likes a lot of sun, but again, it can hang out in the shade. It's another one with a range of soil moistures. I generally see it in wetter soils, but it can hang out in drier, sandy soils too. This one can get up to 20 feet tall, and pretty much like deer love dogwood. And we're going to talk about this at the end too. They love red osier dogwood. And so Tom's got some examples at the end of this presentation of like different fencing and protective stuff, or Reb talked about the tubes. You definitely want to do stuff like that for when these guys are getting going, or else you're just going to have them totally munched on by a bunch of deer.
Allegheny serviceberry. We have a lot of it around here, especially in our state forest. It is the first tree to bloom in the spring of the year, and everything seems to be, it's used as a benchmark as to how things are doing. Sun to partial shade, moist to dry soils, often found in very sandy soils in our state forest, grows 15 to 20 feet high, and it can be used again. Tell where my priorities are for pies and muffins and wine. And the birds especially like it. It is one of the first trees to have food on it for the birds, and another name for it is Juneberry, and that's where it comes from. And then this downy serviceberry, essentially, that was mentioned, that's offered by another district, essentially looks very much like it. It's hard to tell the difference between them, but this is the Allegheny serviceberry that we're often hearing here, and it is native. Winterberry, you're going to need a wet site for this one. It grows from shade, partial sun, and the soil's wet. Now you see on the left-hand side that it's growing along somebody's fence in their yard. And yes, it can be grown in your yard, but you're going to have to water it a lot. Or for instance, if you had a downspout that came off the house and that dumped out there on that plant, if you planted it there, you could grow it there. Otherwise, it grows in very, very wet conditions, and 15 to 20 feet high. And I've seen robins eating this in November in some bog areas. And it is poisonous to humans. So be careful and enjoy.
High bush cranberry is another one that prefers full sun. It can survive in some partial sun. It's gonna like more moist soils. I've only really seen this along like within wetlands or along shorelines. It's like a lot of other ones. It's a great wildlife shrub because it, again, with that like seasonality of fruiting, it's going to feed a lot of different songbird species into a winter. And in thinking about that, it's good to have like a mix of different like flowering and fruiting plants in your, like have a diversity of things that have different seasonality throughout the year as far as when they are doing those different things, because it's going to support like the widest range of wildlife in your space. So again, this is another one that holds its fruit into the winter, which a lot of songbirds rely on. And buttonbush is another one. So this is a full sun plant. It likes wetter soils. I've pretty much solely just seen it in wetlands or along like the shorelines of different inland lakes. So it says on here that it can be in a range. I've mostly seen it in really wet spaces, but and this one I've already called out other cute things before, but this one's really adorable. I mean, look at that little butterfly on that little poop ball of a flower. So they're kind of silly looking, but it's they support a lot of different pollinators. So again, in supporting a lot of insects, you're going to support food chains from the bottom up, which is great.
Eastern redbud, fabulous tree, small tree. Likes to be grown in full sun, but once it's established, it'll survive in the understory. And I'm talking about redbud here, but I always connected it to white flowering dogwood. You'll see why in a minute here. It grows on dry soils or well-drained loamy soils, 15 to 30 feet high, and it does provide nesting and cover. It does not have much as far as anything that the wildlife can eat. And the white flowering dogwood, move on if you would, it blooms almost the same time. And as a young guy, I planted these side by side, and they bloom almost the same time. There's a little bit staggered off, but often they're in bloom at the same time and provide a phenomenal contrast. And it's just my favorite, one of them. They're all my favorite, I guess. And again, it lives in the sun, and it will survive in the understory, having grown up around other trees. You can find this sometimes in an oak forest, and the oak forest is probably, I don't know, 70, 80 years old, and all these white flowering dogwood are underneath it. And again, once they have to start out in the sun, but then will hang in there in the shade for decades. And they prefer moist to wet soils, and it does well on loamy soils, but you'll also find it on sand doing quite well. And the height of this is comparable to the redbud, 12 to 20 feet. And most wildlife use some parts of that. Fruit of the flowering dogwood is poisonous to humans. We have a technician here that says that he's tried it and he's still with us, so I don't know how serious that is, but I've not eaten it. But again, enjoy here. Fragrant sumac is kind of new to me. I did not grow up with this, but I've learned about it. The Grand Traverse District has a planted on the left-hand side of their walkway as you walk up to their building, and it's vibrant red in the fall and offers the berries and that sort of thing. It is native to this area. It grows in a wide range of soils. It's a pioneer species, meaning it's the first one to start in a situation with denuded vegetation. They'll sometimes use this to reclaim mine sites, and it grows 4 to 6 feet high, and birds and small animals like it. And the big thing with this is, for me, is that I would get people asking, what can I plant in the shade? I need to plant something in the shade, or I need some sort of barrier or screening from the neighbors or whatever. And this gives you the opportunity for something that will grow in the shade, this fragrant sumac.
You put it. But so some other shrubs that are for sale at the different conservation districts. So I saw a few people say that their favorite was American witch hazel. So you already know what that one looks like. And this one's one of my favorites because it's one of the only ones that flowers in the fall. It's got these cute little crepe paper flowers. They're like a bright yellow and sort of like unfurl. Lingonberry supports a lot of birds with the fruits that they have. Persimmons supports a lot of wildlife with the fruits that a lot of different small mammals eat them. And silky and gray dogwoods, both of them are, again, I generally am seeing them on like more moist soils, but not necessarily. Pasture rose and pussy willow, they support a lot of different pollinators, which is helpful. And again, like what Tom was saying, fragrant sumac is the one shrub that you can plant it into the shade and it'll be fine.
Kind of in summary here, is that Franklin mentioned about the deer, and the deer are a big problem. We have a lot of forests around here that got started back when there wasn't a lot of deer, and there's a lot of deer now. And you need to do something to protect them from the deer. There's the tubes, as you can see in the upper left-hand corner. There can be some fence. You can do some plastic fence. You can do a drain tile that's slit and put around the trees. That'll help as far as the girdling from the mice or the voles. In the lower left-hand corner, there's a fence you can put up, and they're picturing there plastic fence. And then over on the right-hand side, lower corner, again, those plastic things that you can put around the trees. They help My favorite one is in the middle. That's one in my place that's fencing a tree that I'm protecting from the deer because I'm an old guy and I can't replant that thing and have it grow again. I gotta protect what I got. And what I've got there is 2x4 dimension on wire fence and a single stake, and 10-foot piece will give you a 3-foot in diameter hoop around the tree. You're going to somewhere between a 10 and a 13-foot piece of fence. 10 works out nice because if you got a 100-foot roll, you can get 10 pieces out of it, and a steel stake. And then if you'll notice right down towards the bottom of the tree is a plastic tree guard, and those work really well. And I would just give you some facts here, not necessarily endorsing any of these people, but Tractor Supply has fence, and Blaine Farm and Fleet has fence. They have the fence post and those tree guards. If you're looking for those, you can get them at Forestry Supply catalog, which are very expensive, but the McGough's in Traverse City has them for $1.09 a piece. And that's a good buy to protect your tree from being girdled by the rabbits, the voles. In a fence, you're going to end up with a cost somewhere around $18 per tree, but it's golden. You all you have to do is water it, and that's the next thing I talk about. Is Rev talked about watering and at least a gallon per week. A little trick that I've done is initially when I've had my place, I didn't have a big tank to haul the water, and I used 1 gallon milk jugs, and it turned out working better than carrying it in pails, because time I got down there, that all splashed out of the pail, and the gallon milk jug had the lid on it. You can reuse them again. Come fall of the year, you can send them to recycle. Another thing in summary is that from my experience is plant what you can care for and do a good job with. The cost for some of these hardwood trees gets up there, and just think it through before you go plant a whole lot of trees and have too many of them die. And then one of the presidents, they talked about the cute deer. The deer have to try these things. They may not like them, but they're going to have to try them. So even though the deer may not like it, they're going to have to try it out. In summary too, about fertilizer, don't fertilize the first year. You can do some fertile topsoil in the hole. If you got some, that'll work. Don't put a lot, but mix it in well. And another thing you can possibly use the second year and third year, don't fertilize the first year, would be a tablespoon, a 12 or 19, which is easy to come by if you don't have any other sorts. It's worked well for me. And a tablespoon, you'd measure it. What I do is measure it into a Campbell's soup can. Yeah, that looks about right. Take note of it. Then use a plastic pail so that the fertilizer isn't reacting with the metal pail. And the other thing I tell you, more is not better when it comes to fertilizer. Use that small amount at tree and around the drip line of the tree, which is going to be out there probably somewhere around 4 inches away from the tree. Don't get it too close to the tree.
Yeah, it's definitely something to plant for. You are never going to plant more trees than deer are going to be able to eat. There are so much deer. So plant what you can protect is so much better than trying to like outdo them with numbers. And so Tom was talking about different places that you can pick up some of this fencing material and stuff. And Reb mentioned this, like Grand Traverse's tree tubes, but all 3 conservation districts have different protective accessories for your seedlings when you're planting them. So we've got different heights of tree tubes of different materials. Benzie also has these round tree mats, and Grand Traverse and Leelanau also have that Terrasorb. So is that stuff that he was talking about that's the same kind of technology like baby diapers as far as like retaining moisture around tree roots. So different conservation districts have different things to help your seedlings get going. And so after we're done sharing this presentation, I'm going to get into the chat and I'll put in all 3 of these links. these will take you right to the online order forms for all 3 conservation districts. So a lot of stuff that we talked about, you can see it and place an order to your respective conservation districts. But so do you all have any questions? It's like 6:47. We've got a little bit of time where we can take some questions. I see that the chat box is bumping, so we can go through some of those. But let's see. While you all think about different questions, you can throw some stuff at us. I'm gonna throw those 3 links for the different conservation about your tree. Because you just got hit with a lot of information. Here, I guess, yeah, let me pull up the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up, Steve?
I think I sent it as an email because I didn't want to interrupt like some people. I've got a site where we've had to take down on a beach because of the beach disease next to a historic building. And I need to put another tree there, and I'm looking at putting a miniature tulip tree, but I can't find any in this area at all. The nearest I can find is a nursery down in Kalamazoo. I see you have tulip trees, but you don't have any of the miniatures, do you?
No, and a lot of the stuff that we sell is just native non-cultivar. So anything that's a miniature tulip tree is something that humans have done, like the crossbreeding, or we've talking about the genetics. So the conservation district doesn't usually sell.
No, I understand that, but
yeah,
as I say, my problem is it's a historic building. I can't put a big tree next to it because it will damage the building. Right. Thanks.
It is something, that last category of stuff that we talked about, a lot of those shrubs and smaller trees, a lot of those are full sun species. And there are a few different things that we talked about that get to 15, 20, 25 feet. Like how Tom was talking about, like Eastern Redbud or Eastern Flowering Dogwood, or a couple of those a lot of those smaller tree species really like having full sun. And there's some that go to that 20, 25 foot, and there's a lot of really pretty flowering ones there. So as far as looking for a replacement tree, some of those smaller tree species might meet your needs.
Thanks very much. Enjoyed the seminar.
Thank you.
I have a question on tube shelters. I've had the experience that shrubs thrive in the tube shelters, then it seems like they get too overcrowded or overheat and die back. And I've also had the experience when I remove the tube shelters, the stems don't seem strong enough to hold the shrub up anymore. So my question is, when is the ideal time to remove that tube shelter?
This is going to be potentially a frustrating answer, and also if you have advice with this too. So the point of the point of the tree tubes is to sort of get them to grow above where they will be, like above the danger zone for herbivory with deer. That's why like a lot of people push like the 4 or 5 or even 6 foot tree tube, is to try to get them to have that growth spurt to get over where they're going to get nibbled by deer. With that though, you can't, even when they first start like overtopping that tube, you can't immediately remove the tree tube, because we did just convince that tree of like, okay, we need you to grow up. And so it put a lot of energy growing up, but it didn't put a lot of energy in building girth around its trunk. So if you move the tree tube too early, when it first initially tops that tree, if you remove the tree tube right when that happens, that tube is also acting as its support at that time. And so you will have some trees that potentially snap and topple over because they've been relying on that tree tube for support. So, and I've seen different advice and online and looking into this. And like I said, you might have some personal experience with this. But because it depends on different species and how their growth patterns are. Because it seems like, and as a huge generalization of like when that tree is initially overtopping that tube, to still leave it on there for 2 or 3 seasons as it starts filling out widthwise after it's hitting that height that you wanted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's a lot of stuff in the chat, so I'm like scrolling through here and also like ready to answer any of your questions. I got you all super jazzed about root beer with sassafras.
I have a question.
Yes.
We have a property on Torch Lake, and we lost quite a number of trees over the last 2 or 3 years to beech bark disease, but also snapping. And I would like to replant some trees. They are a bit on the slope because it's right by the lake where the property is, but the street is a bit higher up. Now, there are still surrounding trees. If I choose seedling trees for replanting, and it says they will grow in shade or partial shade, will they grow even though there are tall trees around them?
Yes. So whenever we talk about shade tolerance, it's sort of like because every tree is going to like having more like sunshine is how they're photosynthesizing. If something is shade tolerant, it can put up with being sort of overtopped by other trees. So as you look through, and so like a lot of stuff that we talked about is thrown around like partial shade and stuff, and like even on the order forms, they have little descriptors of these different tree species. If you've got stuff on there that says like that it's shade tolerant or that it's okay with partial shade, those tree species, if they match the site conditions like the soil types that you have in those canopy gaps, those would be your best bet for planting intermixed between those bigger canopy trees that you already have.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Let's see. How do we best control insects on small seedlings? Do you want to jump in on that question?
I don't know, just want to answer that.
I guess it's like which insects, because a lot of times, so a lot of the things that we were just talking about, so I even talked a lot about like supporting pollinators and stuff, where there's a lot of caterpillars that are going to eat the leaves of different trees. To a point, like having a lot of insect activity on your trees is a good thing. That means you're supporting the whole food chain from the ground up, as far as like the more insects that are bothering your trees, the more songbirds that will be supported in that space and sort of like up through the trophic levels. However, there are a lot of there's a lot of invasive insects that are problematic that do not fit into our native ecology. So if you've got beech trees that are struggling with beech scale or hemlock woolly adelgid, obviously the emerald ash borer, there are some insects that are not super great, and the only way to really deal with those insects is to treat the tree with like different chemical insecticides and stuff. But if you're seeing insect activity on your trees, like native insect activity, that's really awesome. That means you're just supporting the overall ecology of your space. Oh, Tom, this one could be for you. Cheryl's asking, could you talk a bit about the pros and cons of the various fencing tubing methods?
We'll kind of take off from where we were at just with the weakness of the tree with the tube. The tubes sometimes the tree will be weak and you have to baby it, or you may even have to, if you have a tube, take the tube off, maybe snip a couple branches and clean it out inside. Sometimes even a bird will go down in there. The bluebirds like to go down the tubes, in which case I guess that's pro and con. Is bluebirds would like them, but when you buy a tube, there's a little net usually that comes that you can put over the top. The tree will grow up through. It'll keep the bluebirds out, but you may have to clean that tube out once or twice, or just check on it at least once a year and clean it out. So they can work. They're better than nothing. The fence is my favorite, having done this all my life, with that wraparound. And you may have a budget that you only can plant so many trees, or spend so many dollars, and pick a quantity that you can do a good job with, and put the fence around. I mean, if you need to trim the grass in there, you can unhook the fence and take care of it. Not the Grand Traverse, Leelanau District is going to, I'm going to do it, is do an example of how what this fence looked like, and I'll have one at the seedling sale to see what it looks like and what you might be getting into, which isn't all that bad. You know, you'll be able to, I'll be there and you can tap me on the shoulder and have me explain it if you wish, but there'll be one there to look at. And the plastic fence, we have some experience with, you know, it looks like that it's sure thing and the deer will stay out. Well, it seems to keep the deer out, most of them, until something hooks onto them, but we have problems with the rabbits eating through them. That's the reason for that tree guard wrapped around the tree, is that the rabbits and also the hare, which is essentially like a big rabbit. And you may not think you have any around, but you'd be surprised how many is around you and you didn't know it. But they're out there. So I don't know, any more clarifications on the fence? Best off with the metal fence, bottom line.
Cheryl's also asking, if you give a tree a gallon of water per week, should that be all at once, or a half gallon twice a week if a gallon won't drain quickly? I'm very much in the camp of giving that tree that gallon all at once, because you're probably planting more than one tree and it's probably already a lot of work to bring all those buckets and all the water out there the one time. So you might as well just have it be like your weekly duty. But how it's I don't know, horse a piece either way. It's fine.
Ellie,
Sorry.
I have a question on crab apples. I've had good luck with them for wildlife. They're hardy. They don't need any pruning or fertilizing. They have good flowers. They have good small fruits. But the conservation districts never have crab apples in their selection. I would assume that there must be some native crab apples.
So I'm gonna let you take this, because this is my first seedling sale season, so I don't know the history of what we've sold and why.
The different districts over time have offered apple trees, different apple trees, for whatever reason, whether you wanted to make cider or applesauce or eat them or whatever, and they found that it wasn't that good of a seller. I mean, and they let it be to the nursery people to sell them. The districts did sell Washington Hawthorn, which is related to crab apples, and for a while, and I guess still some of them do. So we did sell something in the apple family for a while there, and then you don't see much of it around. If there was a demand for it, you know, we could put it back in the program. We do rotate around different species. For some species that only show up every third year because they're not a big seller, but they're important to have out there. And if there's a demand, we'll certainly include it in the sale. You know, this isn't a big money maker for us. It's that we want to make them available for people to plant.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome. Brian had a question in the chat. If you don't live on the property, what species or methods do you best recommend for highest chance of survival? I was thinking of possibly creating a short water tower with drip lines. Number one, that's a really cool idea, and I'd be interested about what you're scheming of how to make that. But the most important thing, to really match the species to the site. I could tell you like, oh yeah, this is the hardiest tree species. If it's not, but if you don't have the right conditions for that species to thrive in that space, like it's not really going to matter if I tell you something specific, right? So like all this different advice that we talked about as far as like sunlight needs and soil moisture preferences and stuff, it's just mostly it's important to look at what you have, the area that you're thinking of planting, and choosing the species that are most appropriate for that space. That will be the species that will be the best chance of survival in your area. Obviously, and then what Tom's talking about with different like deer deterrents and stuff. So maybe if you're planting a bunch of trees kind of close together in an area that you're not going to be at very often, so maybe put like one big fence around the whole space that you're planting these, like the whole canopy gap that you're putting the trees in. Maybe that instead of fencing off the trees individually, you just make one like compound to keep some deer out. But so there's different things you can try, but really it's just matching the correct species to your property.
I can expand on this a little bit here as far as the drip lines and that sort of thing. They do work. Yeah, that does work. You used to see creating a short water tower with drip lines. That can work. Over time, though, the water that's in those tanks sometimes gets full of slime and it plugs up the drip lines. It plugs up the emitters. If you are able to run a hose out there, it can be cheap hose. You can even bury it for a short period of time, which would make it last longer. It can get expensive, but it does work, and you can get timers to put on them also. And another possibility would be is to mulch around the trees, which the conversation will keep going here. You mulch around the trees, and the thing is, you want mulch that's somewhere probably 3 inches deep. But the thing is that you don't want to have green mulch. And if you have green mulch, the detritus feeders will take up all available nitrogen, and they'll starve the tree of the nitrogen. So you want old rotten compost. It could be, if you have an old compost pile that you can move around those trees, that's fabulous. If you have old leaves, you want to have leaves that are at least a year or two old, put around there. If you want to go scrounge up some leaves in the woods and use it as mulch, that's fabulous. You can buy old hay or straw. That works. The other thing with having mulch around them, from my experience, is sometimes you invite the voles. It's like a short-tailed mouse that will overwinter in there, and they'll graze on the tree or eat on the tree during the winter. You would want to rake the mulch a little bit away from the tree from winter time. Otherwise, you just create a place for it to live along with the food for the winter.
Well, in respect to everyone's time, thank you for all these great questions. Thank you for joining and listening to everybody. I'm going to send everyone like a follow-up email tomorrow. So I'll have all of our contact information, and like some different advice or like places that you can look into some of these ideas more. And a feedback survey about what you thought of this whole experience. So at some point in your emails tomorrow, you will get an email from me about all that kind of information. So thank you very much and have a great rest of your evening.
If you have additional questions, you can call us up or email us, and we'll be glad to get back to you.
Thank you.